Hello Year 10 and welcome to this week's episode of your English podcast. This week we'll be focusing on Sonnet 29 and I'm Mr Matharu. We also have
Miss Thornhill
and Miss Smith.
Brilliant. So first of all, let's talk about what this poem is about. And I think it's important to understand that first of all, this is a poem about her marriage and her love for Robert Browning. And what's interesting is that she's definitely showing that rebellious and outspoken nature that would not be typical for a woman in the Victorian era.
Yeah, because in Sonnet 29 she's talking about her borderline obsessive thoughts for her lover who is absent. So she's not with him. When she's not with him, she thinks about him constantly, which is shown in the imagery in the first part of the poem when she talks about the vines and the leaves wrapping themselves around the trunk of a tree, and I think that's a metaphor for her thoughts, that she's constantly thinking about this man, whom she later goes on to marry, Robert Browning. This marriage, if we link back to context again, was actually forbidden by her father. Her father didn't want her to marry him, but she went against her dad, she rebelled against him. She marries him anyway, which I think shows how strong her love for this man was and how determined she was as a woman to do what she wanted to do.
Definitely. I mean, I think we could probably talk a little bit about language now as well. So I think, obviously, referencing what you were saying then, Miss, about some of this sort of wild, unrestrained imagery. So sort of, for an example, wild vines, I think sort of suggests her longing and the passion that she feels within the relationship, and shows sort of her obsessive perhaps feelings for the person that she's talking about.
Yeah, and her intense emotions, which can be shown that the language is quite suffocating, isn't it? When she's talking about him and all the descriptions of her lover, she puts it into the context of herself, showing that she feels that she can't exist without him. And at the end of the poem, if you see the repetition of thee, which is a word that runs, a pronoun that runs through the poem, she says, I do not think of thee, I am too near thee. So when she is close to him, that's the only time when she feels her mind is free and she doesn't think about him anymore.
Yeah, and we can also talk about the use of imperatives as well. So she's being quite sort of commanding in what she's saying. So she's saying renew, rustle. It's sort of this imperative language, which I guess tells us a little bit more about her character and her sort of nature as well.
Yeah, and the use of the word rustle is quite auditory, isn't it? So it's appealing to our senses. We can almost hear the longing in her.
In terms of structure, one point I did want to make is that obviously the form, it takes a sonnet form, which again is not typical for a woman of that era, and this is typically would be written by or spoken by a man in those times. So again, it's challenging that stereotype and challenging and reinforcing that rebellious, outspoken nature that we can see throughout the poem.
Yeah, because it's actually a Petrarchan sonnet, which were normally written by men who were suffering with, sort of unrequited love. Her love isn't unrequited, but in a sense it feels the same because she can't be with her lover. As we know, she was very sickly in life, so she spent a lot of time on her own and in her bed, where she would be just thinking about being with this man.
Key themes that we can see as well. I think passion is a big key theme here.
I think that's shown by, if you look at the punctuation, so the exclamation marks, which is showing her excitement. When she thinks about this man, she gets excited. Also
Definitely.
Nature.
Yeah, so obviously there's, as we've said, like the extended metaphor, so she references the tree and the birds. So obviously this link to nature, which I think she sort of is maybe comparing her feelings to how maybe big and powerful nature could be, perhaps.
Also how strong she characterises Robert Browning as being stable and dependable, because she likens him to a palm tree and a strong tree.
No, absolutely. So, in terms of critics, we need to tie this to a critic. as we all do need to, in a high ability answer. So in terms of critics, one that does stand out for me would be feminism. Why do we suggest that feminism could link to this particular sonnet?
I think we've got, sorry miss, the flowery imagery, or the imagery of the flowers, which was commonly used to symbolise female sexuality. And as I think we mentioned before, you know, women weren't supposed to express strong emotions or ideas verbally or in their writing, which she does. She goes against the norm, doesn't she? And in her time, flowers were representative of the beautified female appearance.
Good.
Definitely. And then just thinking about some other poems that we could potentially link this poem to. So I think Love's Philosophy is an obvious choice.
Because of the nature, the link to
Definitely.
nature. And the other one, which also talks about obsessive love, would be Friar's Lover. So I think, you know, those are two good poems that if you wanted to compare to, definitely.
Good. So thank you for listening, Year 10. This concludes this week's episode, so please do have a go at the work this week, and we'll speak to you next time.